why, and see if how good we are with this bracket. And this will all be out in nicely in D1 Softball on Sunday morning. So you can at me all you want, but I'll be on a plane. I feel like that's a movie. Just do your work and get on a plane. Maybe instead of going to back home to Orlando, I should go to like an island and just do the live show from a selection. All right,
There
let's
are worse ideas.
let's start with the simple stuff here. Now let's get into this, Justin. The number one overall national seed. I have had Texas now for a few weeks. Of course, we covered Saturday night. Oklahoma beat Texas to win the final Big 12 tournament title game that Oklahoma and Texas will be in. Tennessee is also in the mix. For the won the regular season title, got knocked out by the SEC quarterfinal. I have, and folks, the way I will do it, I'll say what I have. Justin may say a different opinion. We could discuss, and we'll kind of come together if they're to a middle ground, I guess. So I have Texas number one. I still have Texas number one. I think they still have the best resume in the sport. They did win the regular season Big 12 title. I know they lost the championship game, but you look at Texas. Mike White said this in the postgame press conference, which you could find on the In the Circle YouTube channel. Number one RPI. They have 6 top 10 wins. They have the most, I think, let me see, they're looking at their latest metrics, folks, which is some of the stuff the committee uses to pick these things. 16 top 25 wins, which is quad ones, which is phenomenal. That's the best in the sport. 30 top 50 wins. To me, Justin, I still have Texas number one seed. Any objections?
No, no. And I think one thing that's key there is we've seen in the past that overreacting to a conference tournament result is a potential fallacy for those of us who live in the world of, okay, what's the committee going to do? Like Oklahoma won the Big 12 tournament title, but how much does that matter towards the overall seeding is a very pertinent question. We've seen in the past that it doesn't necessarily factor in like you might think it would. Like there is a certain thing as recency bias. It's not bias. I mean, they look at the last 10, but a conference tournament result determining something like that when two teams are close or whatever else doesn't always factor in as much. So I was going to say Texas too. So I'm actually with you on that one. So we're 1 for 1 so far.
6-3 in top 10 wins, Texas over Oklahoma. 16-9 in top 25s. I mean, they have them in the metrics. Tennessee actually somewhat has a better resume. You could argue Tennessee might have an argument, but Texas has a way better schedule strength than both Oklahoma and Tennessee. So I have Texas number one. Here's where it gets interesting. A couple weeks ago, I had Tennessee flip to the 2, or at least a week ago. I don't remember the dates, folks. By the way, it's been a big week, long week, fun week, but a
I
long
don't know
week.
what day of the week it is.
Yeah,
So
no, you literally don't. I have to because I have to fly out of here. Otherwise, I'll live here forever. I had Tennessee as a 2 over Oklahoma. Oklahoma goes on, wins the Big 12 tournament. I know Tennessee you could argue, has a better resume, but I do think Oklahoma, with this Big 12 tournament, and Tennessee losing early in the SEC tournament, Justin, which we were at, I have Oklahoma now as a 2. I have Tennessee a 3. I think here's the thing. Texas, Oklahoma, Tennessee are your locks for top 3. Would you agree with that? That's the lock, top 3.
yeah,
Okay?
yeah. I mean, I think the team, and we'll talk about them when we get to their seed line, but I think the team that people would probably most argue would be Oklahoma State. But if you look at the rest of Oklahoma State's resume, it doesn't lock them into that spot. It doesn't put them in that spot.
Yeah, not a
And
top 3.
Tennessee winning the SEC is big. Like it's a tough SEC, and you saw how beaten up some of those teams got this year. Winning that conference, it's a big deal. And again, back to the not super relying on a conference tournament result. Tennessee made an early exit. I agree that it probably does knock them out of the 2 seed, well, knock them out of any chance at the 2 seed.
With Oklahoma winning
With
Big
yes,
12.
because Oklahoma took care of what they needed to take care of to get there,
Yeah,
to stay there, to be there, whatever word you want to use.
sure.
But I actually do think Tennessee's probably a top 3.
I
SEC
agree.
champion means something.
I do. So I have Texas 1, Oklahoma 2 seed, Tennessee the 3. Here's where the shuffling begins, guys. I think
This is where it gets fun.
Oh yeah, and who knows? Hopefully, as long as we get this done before I got to get out of here for the airport, I'm good. The 4 seed, Justin. I think it should be the Florida Gators as the 4 seed, and I'm gonna tell you why. They won the SEC tournament, made a great run. I'm looking at the metrics here, Justin. This is all updated. I'm a dork, so I get numbers. I know how to get numbers. That's all I'm gonna say. Florida has 8 top 10 wins now. 8. That's impressive. That's unbelievable. And that's what happens when you win the SEC tournament. That's why, the SEC tournament, man, you could skyrocket up. 8 wins. The best. That's the best of any of the team in the country right now. They passed Texas in that. From that Florida standpoint. That's the big pro there. 17 top 25 wins. That is very strong. I'm looking at overall 24 top 50 wins. That's very good. That's right up there with the Tennessees and et cetera. From that standpoint, Oklahoma, for example. The negative is perhaps the non-conference schedule, Justin. What's the Florida non-conference schedule? It's the thing that's kind of held them back throughout the season. But I gotta believe, with the body of work they've done in the SEC, they have a win against UCLA. Those top 10. To me, they should be the 4. And listen, if they ended up jumping Tennessee, which I don't think will happen, but let's say they did, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. But I think Florida should be the 4 seed, which is amazing because I've had them outside the top 8 all year, up until maybe borderline 8 and 9 in my in recency few days. But I think they did what they needed to do to lock up a top 8 seed, and I think they should be the 4 seed. Your thoughts?
I don't love the non-conference.
Go ahead.
For starters. I don't love the non-conference. And actually, I think their non-conference, if I pull a metric up in just a second, I think they're 58 non-conference strength of schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Before the Florida State home and home, they were in the 110s, 120s, 130s. And those 2 Florida State games pulled them that much higher. Like, I understand what's on the team sheet right now is 58. I don't love the non-con. Those early season weekends, it's turned out well for the Gators, don't get me wrong, because they've won in conference and everything else, but I don't love that non-con. I would have Florida as a top 8 personally. 4 feels a little high to me. They've gotten hot at the end, which the committee likes.
Yeah.
The committee likes the last 10 and the recency and all that kind of stuff. 4 feels a little high, but
yeah. But again, they win the SEC tournament and they swept A&M before that. Beat Florida State on the road, but they're on a winning streak here, Justin.
They're on their last 10 look really nice.
Who would you make the case to be the 4?
I'd probably go out to the Pac-12 to be honest with you.
Ooh.
I mean, I feel like a UCLA team that swept Stanford, just won the Pac-12 tournament title. They got just lambasted in the first couple of weeks of the season. Well, first week of the season, those Texas and Oklahoma State games. But then in conference, they've been very sharp. They picked up a couple of wins in Clearwater. I think I would probably have UCLA for, and now they're the twice over Pac-12 champions, which I think similarly means something in my brain.
I have UCLA for the record in the top 8. I don't have them that high. Here's the Florida beat UCLA, which was in February. Granted, they did beat UCLA head to head.
They did. Yeah.
Florida 8 top 10 wins. UCLA 4. Okay, I'm just going to give you some head to heads here. Now you're right. UCLA has a tougher schedule, but Florida 8 wins to UCLA's 4 in there that matchup. 24-19 in top 50 wins in favor of Florida in the top 50. That were from that standpoint, 17-9 quad 1 in favor of Florida. That's a significant separation there, Justin.
Yeah, that is a big number.
I would be surprised if the committee had UCLA that high. UCLA's RPI 10, okay, as well as we do this. Florida's 7. I think Florida's resume is better than UCLA. I think if Florida's not the 4, it's probably going to be another SEC team that the mix. But to me, based on what Florida's done, they should be the number 2 SEC team behind only Tennessee, and that's why I have them as the number 4 seed overall.
Well, that's valuing the SEC pretty highly too. I'm going to assume that's not the last SEC team in your top 8 either.
Probably not. Probably not. Because, I don't know if you've heard, Justin. It means more over there, apparently.
I have heard that for all week. I have heard that for 5 days.
Fair. All right. So here's the interesting deal here. The number 5 seed. Let's address the elephant in the room first. And that is the Duke Blue Devils, who won the ACC regular season title, the ACC tournament title. The last RPI that was updated after all the games, they're now up to 3 in the RPI. They actually passed LSU as a 4 in the RPI. Yet, they don't have a top 10 win. They're 0-1. Remember, the committee made a big deal out of that last year. That's why Alabama jumped up and everything like that. 11 wins, top 25 for Duke. That's a little low, high percentage. Didn't get a lot of at-bats out of it. 17 top 50 wins. They're 17-5 there. KPI, which is a new metric that the committee has the option to use as a, and we had Kurt McGuffin on the podcast that they have as a reference. They have them at 4. Every metric has them super high, 3, 4. I think Duke should be in this spot, but the question that I have is the committee going to punish them because they don't have the lack of a top 10 win? We saw that with Stanford last year, where they were the 4 national seed, 4 RPI seed, excuse me, and dropped out of the top 8. And the committee pointed out to the lack of top 10 wins. Same thing with Northwestern. What do you think, Justin? Do you think that is a start of a trend or an outlier? What is your opinion on Duke? Because that's the one team that I am having trouble with figuring this out. Because a lot of these metrics have them as a top 4, top 5, but the resume would suggest they're a bubble top 8 seed, but they won the regular season and ACC tournament title. Where do you stand on Duke?
It's tough. I mean, it's tough because they actually did play the teams in the conference. They were the ones that played Florida State, that played Clemson, that played Virginia Tech, and I believe 2 of those 3 were on the road. I think Clemson and Florida State were on the road. And then they lambasted Virginia Tech when they had them at home. It's tough though, because you're right. I do think there's a certain element of it being a start of a trend, a continuing practice, whatever, for the committee to expect. And I think it's a fair expectation. Don't get me wrong, I think it's a fair expectation for the committee to expect a team seated this highly to have something to fall back on. Like, if you look at Duke's resume, their highest non-conference win is Charlotte. And Charlotte's a good club. They're 27 in RPI. But Duke's highest RPI win is Charlotte. Their second out of conference play. Their second highest out of conference win, Boston University. Their third highest, Liberty. And then you get to Nebraska from opening week of the season. So it's 4 wins down the line of non-conference wins in terms of RPI before you even get to another Power 5 team. And that's not a knock on Charlotte or Boston or Liberty, because they're very good clubs. My point is, if you're Duke and you win the ACC twice, you would expect there to be something on the resume beyond just the ACC. And losing to Oklahoma and Puerto Vallarta ain't it. So I think there is a level of an indictment for Duke. They're very good, but I do think there's a certain level of reasonable doubt.
So let me ask you this. Do you think, sorry, Jenna, if you're listening to this episode, do they get Stanford? And you know what that means? They are bumped out of the top 8 like Stanford was last year.
I mean, I think anything's possible. I think 2 ACC championships makes it hard,
Okay,
but anything's possible, especially if the SEC gets the favor that we're thinking they might.
I agree. So we got Duke as a bubble host. Okay. I'm going to give you a shocker here. I'm going to give you a shocker here as a 5 seed. Last year, what was the most shocking part of the last year's selections? You remember? Who was
I
the
believe it was a certain little team that was an elephant itself.
Yeah, Alabama was number 5 seed, right? And the committee's like, oh, we found this number 10 metrics and everything like that. I think this one, I'm going to be a little bold here. I'm going to go another SEC team, but I think people are going to be shocked by some are going to be shocked by this and they're going to be upset, and that's okay. Because I'm curious. I'm curious because if the committee does the same thing they did last year with Bama, I think they're going to do the same thing with this team, and that's LSU.
I knew that was coming.
I think LSU's the 5 seed. That's my 5 seed. Read off the schedule strength for LSU. And their resume is impressive from a schedule strength standpoint. They still have 5 top 10 wins. They have 13 top 25 wins against the top 25, I should say. 13 top 25 wins. 24 against top 50 for LSU. It's a pretty strong resume. Similar in a lot of ways to Alabama last year that the committee liked a lot. But the schedule strength, Justin, is for LSU's what?
So LSU's strength of schedule is 2 overall, and their non-conference strength of schedule is at 28.
That is tough to ignore. Number
Yeah.
2 and 20. And I know some people, when they're watching this, are like, wait a minute. What about Missouri? Because Missouri just beat LSU. Missouri beat them in the regular season. Missouri got to the SEC title game. Justin, read off Missouri's schedule strength.
Well, so schedule strength of 11, non-conference schedule strength of 67.
Bingo. 67. Now, to your point earlier about Florida, if Florida gets bumped a couple seed lines, it's because of the non-conference at 58. It wouldn't shock me if LSU is ahead of Florida at 4. I'm not doing it, but it wouldn't shock me. But I think LSU is going to be the 5, and I think people are going to be upset, and I think Missouri people are going to be mad, and they're going to be like, why is LSU ahead of Missouri? To me, that's my prediction, Justin. I think there will be some people that they're going to be upset. And it seems like almost every year there's an SEC seed line that your people get thrown off by. Remember 2019 when Florida was seeded higher than Alabama and caught everybody off guard? When Alabama had won the SEC championship regular season title, swept Florida during the regular season. Bama got dropped to an 8 seed. I think Florida was a 4-5 seed, even though they were a middle of the pack SEC team that year. It reminds me a little bit of that. We saw that a little bit in recent years. So I think this is the one. I could be wrong. Maybe because LSU to me is fascinating. I think this resume is a top 8 lock for LSU. And that's why I think they will be a 5. But if they're not a top 8 seed by the committee, then they might literally be like 9-10. It's so fascinating. And this is the area with some of these SEC teams that I think they're going to struggle to figure out. So I've got LSU as the number 5, Justin. Your reaction?
Well, I mean, the one thing about LSU, well, 2 things. One, to me, they still have the best non-conference win of anybody this season over Texas.
Yep.
That's a big deal. That's a big deal. And then 2, LSU also has a clean sheet.
Yep.
All of their losses have come to teams in the top 50.
Bingo.
And I believe 11 of their 14 to teams in quad 1, which is the top 25.
Bingo.
Now, they've taken their lumps in SEC play. So it's not like they haven't lost any games. They've lost quite a few games in SEC play. But all of those teams that they lost to are primarily in quad 1. I don't think that's insignificant. If I'm not mistaken, I think the 3 losses in quad 2 are the 2 to Ole Miss and the season-ending loss to Liberty.
Right. Liberty, the USA champion, right? He's in the 30s RPI. Yeah.
Correct. And part of a 3-game series to end the year. Everybody else was in quad 1. I don't think that's insignificant. I don't think that's insignificant. The committee likes a clean sheet. The committee likes a status quo, and I think LSU's status quo has this year been doing what they were supposed to do, taking care of business, so to speak. I
Yeah.
don't think that's insignificant. I mean, five would be interesting given their SEC record, but I think it's defensible too if the committee goes that route.
Not only that, I'm going to give you this stat. These are some of the weird metrics that the committee uses. Opponent strength of schedule. In other words, the opponents that LSU play, what is their average schedule strength? 33. Missouri, 152.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, people are going to be upset about it. And for the record, let me just clarify this before people I'm not saying that if you have an issue with LSU, I'm not saying what I'm trying to do here is try to figure out what the committee's going to do here. Doesn't matter if I agree with it or disagree with it. It's trying to figure out what they're going to do. And usually I call them out if they're not consistent. But I'm telling you, I'm curious. And I'm going to tell you, if LSU is not a top 5 seed or not a top 8 seed, then what that tells me is that they absolutely blew it with Alabama last year, and maybe they backpedaled there, and that might be good news for teams like Duke, for example.
Yeah.
So watch for that.
Well, and every committee picks a different metric that's
Yes.
their primary. Sometimes it's what amounts to a tiebreaker. Sometimes it's just what seems to be the theme of a year. You know, a lot of top 10 teams losing. Well, okay, top 10 wins. A lot of top 10 teams, winning a lot of their games, winning conference championships or whatever. Okay, well, maybe it's who has bad losses and doesn't. Every committee kind of looks at a different metric as I call it their chosen metric. It does happen. Just a matter of which one in any given year.
Yeah. So, all right. So I got LSU as the 5. We'll see how that goes. That should be interesting. Okay. 6 seed, Justin. The candidates are some of the teams that are still on the board here that I think are in the mix. Missouri, we just mentioned. UCLA, you just mentioned, Pac-12 champions, regular season and tournament champions. Stanford, Oklahoma State, Duke. Of those group, who would you make a case for as the number 6 seed?
Well, so I've kind of already given up that I had UCLA higher. So Florida would still be in play for me in mine. I would have Florida probably 6 or 7. Of the teams that are still on the table, I actually like Oklahoma State on the basis of their Texas and Oklahoma series wins. They have some losses that are not great, which I think knock them down this far, but you can't ignore those 2 series wins. 4-2 against OU and Texas.
So Oklahoma State, 6 top 10 wins. 6 top 10 wins for Oklahoma State. 2 against Texas, 2 against Oklahoma. That's pretty strong. Super strong. They have a win against UCLA, who is 10 in the RPI. So that's a top 10 win, and they crushed UCLA, if you recall, on that for Oklahoma State in that regard. So those are the handful of top 10s that they have that is impressive here from their standpoint. I agree with you. I like Oklahoma State. My concern is, does the 2 losses to Iowa State in quad 3, schedule strength, you could correct me on this, it's what, 60s non-conference, 40s overall, 30-40 range?
67 non-conference,
yeah.
35 overall.
Yeah. I think that concerns me a little bit. It does. But man, and again, they don't have the amount of wins. They have 20 wins against the top 50. 20-7 is pretty good. Only 8 quad 1 wins. That's a red flag for me. 8 for Oklahoma State. They made it count though, didn't they? To me, that I'm fascinated to see what the committee does with Oklahoma State. I think they should be a top 8, but the schedule strength and the lack of quad 1 wins only in single digits concerns me a little bit. Now, UCLA has 9 in comparison.
Well, it's important. It's important to point out. Go back to something I said earlier too, because somebody's going to watch this and say Oklahoma State lost to BYU in the Big 12 tournament. Again, conference tournament results are very easily overreacted to.
Yes.
I remember a few years ago, who was it? I think Texas Tech beat Texas. And the thought process was, oh, well, that makes a big, in the Big 12 tournament, the thought was, oh, well, that makes a big deal. Didn't end up making a big deal. So conference tournament results do matter, maybe not as much as it might seem like they do.
And by the way, BYU top 50 loss. I mean, that's a top 50 team. It's not a bad loss.
Yeah,
Not a bad. I mean, the
sure.
way they played, I was there. It was bad. I'm not gonna get me wrong. 5 errors. Um, I would argue that this resume is actually better than last year's team. Remember last year, everybody assumed they wouldn't be a top 8 seed the way they finished the year and everything. They
Mm-hmm.
were a top 8 seed, and they actually finished the year better this year. I find it hard to believe you're not going to have a team in the top 8 that beat the number one ranked team in the country, number one RPI team. The rankings don't matter, so whatever. And the number 2 RPI teams, like right now in the final RPI of the selection show, Texas and Oklahoma are 1-2 in the RPI. Oklahoma State has 4 wins against those 2 teams, and you're not going to put them in the top 8?
Well, and they've
I
been
find that hard to believe.
consistent this year.
Right.
At least they've been consistent this year. Last year, Oklahoma State was wildly inconsistent down the
Yes.
stretch, and I do think that made a difference. The committee likes to reward the recency of the last 10 as part of the metric sheet. At least Oklahoma State's been consistent this year.
So I'm with you. I'm going Oklahoma State 6 seed. Now I could be wrong. I could see Oklahoma State anywhere between 6 and 10. 6 and 10. But I'm with you. And again, no disrespect to the fine folks that you were hanging out with this week in beautiful Auburn, Alabama, the greatest tourist capital of the world. You know, when people make their vacation plans, I always think of Auburn, Alabama, personally. Anyway, there's a lot of propaganda out there about teams that, oh, wow, look at what this SEC team did. And I could have sworn during the week on social media that some of the fans, I thought 10 SEC teams were going to be in the top 8 seeds. It was unbelievable at times watching some of the stuff that I was seeing. I hate to break it to you. Some teams other than the SEC are going to be in the top 8 seeds. Breaking news. I think Oklahoma State should be one of them, personally. Will I be wrong? I could be very much wrong on this. They could easily drop as, I don't think they're I think the lowest they can be is 10. I think that'd be outrageous, personally. But whatever. I mean, Kenny would probably be outraged, but I could also see him at 8-9. But I got him at 6, man. I got him at 6. To me, nobody has those wins against Texas and Oklahoma in the SEC. Nobody.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand they lost Iowa State a couple, and if they get dinged for that, then you better ding other teams too. But we'll see. I'm curious. This is, to me, I am the most fascinated about LSU and Oklahoma State from a seeding standpoint, what they do with those 2 teams. Because I think a lot of people think they're going to be lower seeded than they actually are. We'll see if I'm right or wrong on that, and what the committee does with that. All right, so those are the top 6. Now we got 2 seeds left in the top 8, Justin. We got Stanford, Duke, to me, UCLA, and Missouri in the mix for that 2 top 8 seeds, which obviously means you get to host the Super Regionals. Missouri is a 6 RPI. They have 6 top 10 wins. They made a run to the SEC tournament final. What was your impressions on Missouri, and what did I don't know, I'm assuming somebody asked Larissa Anderson about seeding and all that. I don't know if that was addressed or not over there in Auburn. What was the mood there?
So, I mean, the Missouri plays really well this time of year, traditionally. Like, a couple of years ago, they played Arkansas SEC Tournament Championship. Now it's Florida. In between, you had a sandwich a pretty bad year last year, and look at how they've recovered. Um, Missouri certainly has a quality year going for them. They certainly have finishing well going for them. I keep going back to the performance in the tournament doesn't matter as much, but it does matter some. And Missouri being able to make that run, who they knocked off along the way, Arkansas, LSU, that's a decently big deal. Um, I mean, Larissa Anderson, she talked about it. I mean, it was the what you would expect from somebody who fighting for her club, wanting to see them host as much as they could. I think Missouri's got a case. Um, Problem is when you stack them up against an LSU or Florida, teams that I think are probably their closest competition, if you will. Um, I I feel like they kind of lose out a little bit, to be honest. Against LSU, for instance, even if it's a simple one, the disqualifier might be that Missouri has a quad four loss.
Yep,
LSU does not.
correct.
That's a very quick and simple thing. It makes you go, oh, hmm. Um, Florida, by the way, also does not have a quad four loss.
Right. No,
Um,
that's a very good to bring that up. I concur. Uh, I have UCLA at 7. UCLA won the Pac-12 title. It's why we waited. Um, this is what and it's interesting because Stanford, UCLA. I believe UCLA needs to be higher. That has to be the higher seed than Stanford, in my opinion. I'm looking at this. They beat them in the regular season 3 times at Stanford. Won the regular season title, won the Pac-12 tournament title. Stanford didn't even get to the Pac-12 final at home. Okay. Now I understand, and that's what the thing. RPI is very flawed in that. Stanford's a 5 RPI, UCLA's a 10. To me, if the committee decides to go with Stanford over UCLA as a higher seed, it's because they're just going RPI. But to me, top 10 wins: UCLA 4, Stanford 3 in the wins. You look at other metrics here I'm looking right now. UCLA against Stanford that really jumps out to me here, Justin. And you can 12 top 25 wins for UCLA to 8 for Stanford. 19 and 19 top 50 wins. They're even there. UCLA and Stanford.
yeah.
Stanford has some kind of surprising quad 4 loss, I believe. Kind of give me the quad 4 breakdown, and the schedule strengths for both Stanford and UCLA are very good.
So Stanford right now sits at 9-1 in quad four. UCLA is 8-0. That quad four loss, I mean, there's not a lot of teams in the top 8 with quad four losses. This doesn't usually happen a whole lot. Um, and for Stanford, I'm gonna have to pull the sheet up real quick. Believe that quad four loss was that midweek.
Sacramento State.
Yeah, that's who it was.
Sacramento
Sorry,
State.
my eyes were not going to the
Folks, we're
right
doing
place.
this ad lib live to tape, of course.
Well, correct.
Yeah.
Well, and one thing actually that's interesting, and the reason I got distracted, I'm looking at this metric sheet, and Sacramento State is right on that quad three, quad four bubble. And so my eyes got distracted a little bit. So I mean, a loss to Sacramento State, it's not good. UCLA clean sheet in that metric. Um, and I go back to that Arizona State UCLA seeding a couple of years ago too. Like, remember, the Pac-12 can be an interesting place because they do play these big tournaments in the early season to better their strength of schedule. A team that wins the pack, sometimes can be helped by their non-con, but other times a team that wins the pack may fall behind someone who didn't. So I think that's going to be one thing that's really interesting is, okay, how do UCLA and Stanford shake out? I think UCLA probably still has the advantage in the non-conference
By the
strength
way,
of
I
schedule.
misspoke, by the way. Top 25, Stanford 11 wins, UCLA 9. I misspoke. I think I said something different earlier, so I apologize.
Well, it's also in the wee hours. So,
That's correct, folks. Won't be the last mistake. And we're not editing this anyway. So
I mean,
whatever we screw up, we're going to leave it. But,
we're nerds and we don't sleep. So,
yeah.
um, speaking of which, more caffeine.
I
Um,
just I just think UCLA should. I mean, again, and head to head needs to matter. And they beat them at Stanford. I don't know why Stanford would be ahead of UCLA. Would I be shocked if Stanford was higher seeded? No. But I think UCLA's definitely earned being a higher seed than Stanford, in my opinion. And I think UCLA should be a top 8 seed. So I have UCLA at 7.
well, I already said I have UCLA personally. I have UCLA as top 5 team. So I think UCLA should be higher than Stanford, and I think that head to head, head to head is important. And now UCLA has Pac-12 regular season and tournament championships. I
If
don't think that's insignificant either.
And I think that's something to look for too. Is does the committee look at that head to head as a factor? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. We'll find out with UCLA and Stanford. But again, UCLA has the conference champ. Now they don't look at the conference titles. I get all that, but I just think I like UCLA more than Stanford right now. And Stanford has not been great, recently. So we'll see. Boy,
Yeah.
I'm really making Jenna real happy, and I'm going to be on with her on the live show. I am sure we're going to have some friction on that show. She's going to blow me off instead of just tossing it to me. She's going to toss it to other people now. I just know it. I've done a heck of a job of creating good harmony for that live reaction show by just.
You're setting you're setting the stage so well.
All right, eighth and final seed, Justin. To me, it's between Duke, Missouri, and Stanford. I think are your choices for that eighth and top seed. Let's break down those three teams a little bit, and we can try to make a decision here. Because you got Missouri certainly is a strong candidate with 6 top 10 wins to their disposal. Stanford has 3. Duke, as we've talked about, has 0. That's pretty significant. And yet, it's interesting to me. This is, to me, the fascinating one. Do they go with, if they go metrics, they're going to go Missouri. Missouri's 6 in the RPI. Stanford's 5. So maybe they go Stanford that route. Duke is 3. This is interesting. I'm really interested here with Missouri. Do they go with them and get caught up in the SEC tournament run? Because let's be real. Prior to the SEC tournament, nobody was talking Missouri top 8 seed. Like, really. They were not. But in Missouri's defense, they did beat LSU. They got to the final. That's significant. You got Stanford, who has, I think, right now the favorite to win National Player of the Year, who's a star. I personally think that helped Clemson get that last host spot last year because of Valerie Cagle. I think that's a fact. Look, Stanford's still good. They got a strong schedule. In fact, I want you to break down Stanford's schedule strength, Duke's schedule strength, and Missouri's schedule strength. And then you got Duke, who's been consistent, but the ACC was down there. To me, that's one who gets that 8th seed.
So when you're looking at a strength of schedule, I think we mentioned Duke earlier. You're talking 57 in non-conference strength of schedule. Stanford 11 and Missouri 55. Excuse me. So Stanford blows away the other two in the non-conference strength of schedule portion of things. In the last 10 games, all 3 have been pretty good. You have Duke at 8-2, Stanford 7-3, Missouri 8-2 in their last 10 games. So you've won more than 2/3 of your games the last 10. So that's pretty chalk, pretty even keeled the whole way. I know they don't look at conference championships, but Duke does have 2 conference championships. They won the regular season, won the tournament. Now that can make a difference. If we're talking tiebreaker, it can make a difference. Obviously, Stanford exited the first round. Missouri lost in the championship game of the SEC tournament. And then their results against top 25 quad one teams. Missouri 13-13, Stanford 11-6, and Duke 11-2. And there's a pretty stark difference there too in volume. I mean, in volume alone, much less the wins. Missouri has significantly more losses in quad one, but they've played significantly more games in that quadrant. And I don't think that's insignificant either.
So who do you like? You had to pick one of those
Tough,
3.
honestly. It's tough, honestly.
Right?
I mean, there's 2 that, truth be told, I would probably have top 8.
Okay.
And that's Stanford Duke. Um, it's tough going between those 2, and maybe those 2 are at 8-9.
Ding, 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 ding. That's what I have. See?
See if stop me if you've heard that before. Um, but at the same time, because that was the matchup last year, I could see a scenario where if it's a tiebreaker, well, let's send it to the farm this year. Like, it's nothing to say that that's the committee's exact train of thought, but if it's a happy accident, it's a happy accident. I could see Stanford being 8 and penalize Duke for the lack of top 10 wins. We know that's a metric committee looks at and has prioritized before. So I could see Stanford being 8 and Duke being 9 personally.
The 11 non-conference schedule. And that's the thing committee has usually been very consistent about over the years is the schedule strength, especially non-conference. I think Stanford gets the 8. I got Duke as the 9. I got Duke as the 9. Duke had a bad week that they had nothing to do with, control from. I think a lot of this stuff, like LSU making the run, Florida making the run, I think cost Duke a top 8 seed. I got Duke, though, as a 9. Very similar. Ironically enough, Justin, the same spot that Stanford was a year ago. Stanford was the 4th RPI, dropped to 9. I think Duke does the same thing. And again, there's a majority of there's a good percentage of the committee that's back from last year. So do they continue this, or was last year an aberration? Duke might set that tone at 9. I wouldn't be crushed if Duke was a top 8, but I think Stanford should still be a top 8. I'm going to go Stanford 8. I got Duke 9. I got Missouri 10. And I know people are going to be mad about that. I just don't believe that you're going to put 1, 2, 3, 4 SEC teams in the top 8. Because if you do that in the committee, especially on the back end when you know you got a bunch of SEC teams hosting, you do that, if you do that in their committee, you know what you're going to get called?
Yeah.
Greg Sankey's lackeys. That's what you're going to get called.
That's true.
That's what you're going to get called.
Yeah.
And I don't think you want that. I wouldn't think. At least I wouldn't.
I wouldn't.
So there we go. So I got Duke 9, Missouri 10. Again, we're going to find out what the committee likes here. If they are into the top 10 wins, Duke will not be a top 8. But if they like the metrics, like RPI, they go KPI, they use that, Duke will be a top 8 seed and maybe higher than people think, 4 or 5 seed.
Yeah, it just depends on what their priorities are.
Correct. Of course, we're not done yet. So,
correct.
And I'm choked up. I told you, we're not editing.
It's that important and emotionally moving.
Oh, yeah, trust me, man. I have Georgia 11. I think Georgia, if they would have made the run, kind of like LSU did.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to get some water here, Justin, so you're going to have to talk for me in a minute. I think they would have been a top 8 seed, but they didn't. They were fortunate to beat Auburn. They lost to Florida. Out of sight, you drop. People pass you. I have Georgia's an 11. Any issue there?
No, I think they've done it to themselves. Is the thing. I think if you look at their stretch, going back to the middle of the conference season, I don't think it's an accident. Or excuse me, I don't think it is irrelevant that Georgia started dropping SEC series. They did. They started dropping series in conference play. And I don't think that's insignificant. And I do think it should be something that the committee does pay attention to, because I understand that the record in conference is not necessarily part of it, but Georgia had a chance at far more major wins than they got, and they didn't get them. They lost those games. I don't think that's insignificant either. Early in the season, Georgia could have been a top 3 seed, and then they started kind of flailing a little bit. So they're certainly a host, but I think that's actually a pretty fair place for them, to be honest.
I got Arkansas as the 12. This is the most confident seed, I feel like, from the outside the top 8. I just feel like this is the spot for them. They lost to Missouri. They got to be kicking themselves. If they would have beaten Missouri in that, we're not even going to get into all the weather stuff you had to deal with, Justin, over there. We had beautiful weather in Oklahoma City, by the way. Gorgeous. Mwah.
Quit your bragging. Quit your bragging.
Thank you, sir.
Quit your bragging.
I have Arkansas 12 seed there. I just think that seems like a pretty, like, if I had to, I'd be disappointed if I whiff on that one, personally. Like, other ones I'm going to miss, because seeding is hard. And I'm going to defend the committee. Seeding, I think, is hard. And I think this year, seeding is going to be the theme of this selection process, more so even than who's actually hosting or who's in the field, because I think a lot of people are interested how you see, because we're nitpicking a lot of this stuff. Let me just say that.
Yeah.
This is nitpicking stuff because it's so razor thin, the margins, in my opinion, in a lot of these picks. So, but I have Arkansas 12. Any qualms there?
No, I think it's fair.
All right, 13 seed. I have Alabama, which sickens me, but it does. Under 500 SEC, I get all that. I want to remind people, committees don't care about that stuff. They don't look at conference standings because of the imbalanced schedules and everything. They kind of lucked out here a little bit. I'm not crazy about this seed. I could be talked out of this and drop them if you can make a case for me for somebody else. But you look at the metrics for Alabama, Justin. Those are metrics that the committees usually like.
Well, part of the problem is we're not talking about a year with a lot of great seeds.
Right.
Alabama is not a great seed. They're going to benefit from it being a light year in the seed category.
For
They're
sure.
just going to benefit from it.
Yep.
And if they're going to benefit from it and you put them in different places, like you put different teams in different places, I think it's a decent spot for them. I think it's a decent spot for them, to be honest.
10 wins against the top 25. Strong, you can read off the schedule straight there. It's very strong. It's, again, you could, in a normal year of hosting, you're right, this was a down year for hosting. I think in a down year, they may not host. If they did, they would probably be 15, 16 seed. I actually had them at 15 this week, but some things went in their favor. 7th toughest schedule in the country, 43 non-conference, 0 quad 3 losses, 0 quad 4 losses. Justin, you mentioned we talked earlier about LSU and a clean sheet. Alabama, that's clean sheet. I think Alabama's the 13. Everybody was trying to, it is what it is. I have at the 14 seed, the Ragin' Cajuns of Louisiana. The team that I had hosting last year and didn't host. My one miss last year to host because Utah decided to win the Pac-12 tournament in wee hours. If Louisiana doesn't host this year, Justin, I give up, right?
If you're a mid-major.
Now, I will say the good news for them, last year what the committee said was the lack of marquee wins, right? Two top 25 wins, I think it was, or something like that they didn't, or only had 2 top 10 wins. They didn't like the wins. They have them this year. They don't have that excuse now that they can use on the Cajuns.
All they went and did was beat Oklahoma in Norman. No big deal. No big deal. They just went and beat Oklahoma in Norman.
That's it.
I mean, yeah. I mean, just a small little thing. I mean, there's something to be said too for answering what the committee asked you to do. Like, if the theory is correct and UL just got bumped out at the last minute because Utah won the tournament championship, that means they were in a pretty good position last year. Well, I think they're in better position this year. I like the strength of the schedule better. I like the wins better. And even the Cajuns' losses are not super damning. I mean, they're undefeated against quad 4. They have 2 losses in quad 3. And the rest of their losses all came in quads 1 and 2. They still have a losing record in quad 1. That's not amazing. But I mean, you're talking about you played Stanford, you played Texas, you played OU, you played LSU. Jerry Glasgow's schedule really, really
Isn't it
tough.
the number 1 overall schedule? What's the metrics there? Do you have that in front of you?
Yeah, non-conference.
Toughest non-conference schedule. Unbelievable. Isn't it? And again, they have more top 25 wins, more top 10 wins this year. And as we'll get to, the Sun Belt's a better league this year than it was last year. For example, they have a couple wins against Texas State. That's impressive. They have wins against South Alabama, who's going to be in the field. So I have Louisiana as 14. I'm not even opposed. If I'll say this, if you told me Louisiana's 13, Alabama's 14, I'm not arguing.
No.
I mean, could we make that argument? We make an argument for Louisiana 13 and Alabama 14 here?
Biggest issue the Cajuns are going to have is their last 10's not great. You only had a handful of losses this year, but 2 of those losses.
Alabama's so great. Alabama had a great top 10 last 10 too. Like, come on.
Well, but you're talking about you have Alabama 13, the Cajuns 14. Do the Cajuns have enough to overtake Bama? Like if that's the scenario you're giving me, I don't think the Cajuns do because your last 10 is going to betray you a little bit because you lost to Troy to start that last series of the regular season. And then you lost the Sun Belt Tournament Championship to Texas State. It's just 2 losses. It's not damning. It's not going to keep you from hosting or anything. I just don't think it's necessarily enough to overtake an SEC team for a hosting spot. Now, if you looked at on the merits and the Cajuns were 13 and Bama was 14, would the roles be reversed? Could Bama overtake it? I'm not sure they could do that either. It's almost one of those the call on the field stands type of idea.
Sure.
Either way, I think there's something defensible about it. I think it can be defended no matter which direction it goes at those two in those two spots.
All right, so we're going to go Alabama, but we're going to go with Alabama 13, Louisiana 14 then.
Yeah.
Okay. But if the committee decides to have Louisiana ahead of Alabama, I'm not going to be upset about it.
No, I don't think it's unfair if they do.
If Louisiana would have won the Sun Belt tournament, do you think that would have made the difference there? I kind that because I was wrestling with if they would have won the tournament, I feel like they would be the 13. Bama would have been the 14. That's why I really
I could see losing the Sun Belt tournament because that also makes you even 500 against Texas State this year. You got 2 wins, 2 losses against Texas State now.
Right.
And Texas State's very good, but that series wins a slightly less impressive when you're actually 500. I mean, I could see that loss. Well, that loss coupled with the Troy loss.
The Troy loss probably more significant than the Texas
best.
State. The Troy loss more significant than the Texas State.
Well, I could see the Troy loss putting the Cajuns in a little bit of a, okay, are we going to have them 13 or 14? They just, this loss at the end of the year, and then they go and lose to Texas State. It's like, okay, yeah, let's keep them on the lower.
Right, because Troy is just outside the top 50. La Tech was a loss earlier outside the top 50. Alabama, again, clean sheet. That might be the difference there.
Well, and again, we know that the committee does look at some of the things like how they finished, and just only a handful of losses, but 2 of them in this short period of time. Not great.
Right. All right. Let's get to, I think those are 14 strong locks. Here are now the 2 host teams that, wait, in fact, let me see if I got it. No, here it is. Hold on. Before I talk about these host teams, hold on. Let me get a hand sanitizer for my hands because, woo, this one's dirty. If I had Lysol, I would be spraying this right now, but we don't. So you're just gonna visualize here. In all my years doing the bracketology, this is pretty weak. 15, 16, and 17. We're gonna get to a 17 team that some people are wondering, could they host? And we'll get to that conversation. So, in fact, I'll bring it up now. Here are the 3 teams for the last 2 host spots. Florida State, Texas A&M, Texas State. Texas State won the Sun Belt tournament at home, beat Louisiana. Big congrats to Ricky Woodard and Jessica Mullins. And that senior class for Texas State, who's been together for a while, to knock off Goliath. Louisiana's been that thorn. That's a great ending to them winning a tournament at home, beating the Cajuns. That's a memory they're going to remember forever, and really make players like Mullins and and Vanderford and like legends at Texas State in the long term. So I want to say that's a huge, huge belt. Big. I don't think that's enough to host.
No.
I think it's hard to envision 2 Sun Belt teams hosting, but in theory, that shouldn't matter, but we kind of know it does.
Well, the Sun Belt's a strong league. The Sun Belt's also a top-heavy league.
Yes.
The bottom of the Sun Belt is weak. That is relevant too. Like we don't have a Big Ten team hosting. Why? Because the Big Ten as a whole is weak. Principally, I actually think it's for sure that the Sun Belt is a better softball league than the Big Ten this year.
I agree. By the way, DSR, which is a metric that is new, a metric that the committee does not use, but we use at D1Softball.com. We do not bring up the numbers of DSR for purposes on this Nerdcast because the committee doesn't use it. So, but Nerdcast, but DSR actually has the Sun Belt ahead of the Big Ten, and I agree 100% with that. I think the Sun Belt is the 5th best league in this year.
Well,
better than me.
the problem though is they probably are, but there's just not enough working in Texas State's favor.
Agree, agree.
That 3 game series win or that 3 game series sweep over Penn State started out looking really great. Well, Penn State faded at the end or in the back half of the season. Texas State lost the series to the Raging Cajuns, so it's not like it's a head to head against those two teams based on their non-cons. Like they played head to head and UL won. Um, and no, two Sun Belt teams are not going to host for the same reason that, um, no Big Tens are going to host or whatever else. Um, it's just the conference is not strong enough to support it, to be honest.
At least we don't believe it. It might have been one of those things where it's a little, too late on that. By the way, Texas State stayed at 17 at the latest metrics RPI that we're looking at here. So they're still outside. It's not that that's a big deal. That's still a pretty good range to possibly host, but like that's behind Florida State's 13. A&M is 15 in the metrics there. I'm looking at Texas State's resume. Let's see, Louisiana. Where are they in the top in the RPI? Louisiana is 11.
Yep.
So Texas State has 0 top 10 wins. Now their best. Well, you mentioned the 2 wins against the Cajuns, and then you got the win against A&M.
Win against A&M is
more on that in a
well.
moment. And a win against Baylor, which Baylor has bounced back. You won 3 games against South Alabama. You swept Penn State that didn't age as well. You mentioned you split with Texas Tech. You split with Southern Illinois, which turns out NCAA tournament team that's pretty good. They have a loss to Troy, no shame in that. Lost twice to Tulsa, 65.
Hasn't aged as well as it could have.
No, Tulsa faded at the end, and that was at home. And they also have 2 quad 4 losses to UTEP, who's won in the very high in the 130s, and at Southern Miss. I don't think they host. I don't think that's enough. I think they will be paired up with A&M. However, let's just play devil's advocate here. I think if the committee decided, hey, let's give Texas State the host, I don't think it's at Florida State's expense. It would be at A&M's expense just because it's an easy flip. It's an easy flip. And as I'll mention here momentarily, I have Florida State as the 15 seed, and I have A&M as the 16 seed. And I have Texas State as the quote-unquote 17 seed. They don't seed them. I wish they would. We could go to 32 seeds. It'd be easier. But to me, that is kind of what works. A&M is a 16. Texas State is your 17. And then Florida, that's why I have Florida State 15. You could argue that A&M should be ahead of Florida State, but I have a couple theories on that. But I don't think Texas State hosts. But if they did, I think it's at A&M's expense. They have a win head-to-head against A&M in a midweek, but I don't see it. I'm looking it up right now. A&M, fifth, as far as their metrics are concerned, 33rd overall schedule, 92nd non-conference. That could certainly, if the committee wants to punish A&M, that's a good way. I mean, Texas State, 28 non-conference, 39 overall. But Texas A&M, 7, how many quad 1 wins here? I think they had 7 quad 1 wins. They have 2 wins against Alabama. They've got 2 wins against Mississippi State, 3 wins against Auburn. They have. I don't see it. Listen, if they flipped them, I wouldn't be like, oh my God. It wouldn't be the most craziest thing I ever saw. To me, that's one of those things I have to see it to believe it, Justin. So I will not do that. So, but I have Florida State 15. I know that's a polarizing thing. Blew the Duke game today. Did not look great. I personally don't think Duke. I think the committee already decided if Florida State was going to be a host or not. I don't think they needed to win that game.
There's not enough hosts to go around.
Well, that's the thing. Arizona got bounced early. Early Clemson got bounced. Washington imploded. Virginia Tech lost early. So I think FSU by default, you know who they are. I'm going to say they get in. as the 15.
And they played a very strong schedule. Not they played a very strong non-conference schedule.
Sure.
Lost quite a few of the games, but then they won quite a few of their conference games, and they just played for an ACC tournament
Well,
championship.
and this
So
is why, and this is one of the other reasons I have FSU over A&M. FSU seventh toughest non-conference schedule. Texas A&M in the 90s. 17th overall schedule strength. A&M that's better than A&M. Florida State has wins over Duke, who's a top 10 win. Stanford's a top 10 win. Florida's a top 10 win. People forget that. That actually improves their resume with Florida winning the SEC tournament. 3 top 10 wins. And they also have a top 25 RPI win against Charlotte, who is the American Conference champions. That's 4 wins there. They have a win against Texas Tech, who we'll get to later, will possibly be in the NCAA tournament. They do have 3 quad 3 losses, but one of them is Florida Gulf Coast, who won the ASUN tournament. They're in the field, so that's not a bad loss anymore. By the way, I need to stop yelling. I'm in the hotel. I might get in trouble. I don't know how that works, but I get fired up. There's 2 Syracuse losses, not great. I get you that, but again, Texas State has some bad losses too, and then of course they have a loss to Jacksonville. But I have Florida State 15 because of that. I think they host. There's a bunch of teams in that region that could host. A&M I have behind at 16 because, again, while they do have 7 quad 1 wins, none of them are against top 10 teams, whereas Florida State does have top 10 teams. A&M also has a quad 4 loss as well. They don't have a quad 3 loss, and that's why I think at the end A&M gets the nod over Texas State. I think Texas State goes to A&M, which I think if you're Texas State, that's what you want. What you don't want if you're Texas State is to go back to Austin.
yeah, that's a favorable enough matchup.
And to me, it's a compromise for everybody. A&M host, Texas State's the 17, Florida State host is 16. So that is my top 16 host seeds right there, Justin McLeod. I'm going to read you the super regional potential matchups. See what I did? A&M 16, Texas number 1.
No, I caught it.
Texas A&M. How about this? 215. Oklahoma, Florida State. We've seen that matchup recently, haven't we, Justin?
Sounds familiar.
National Championship Series ring a bell last year?
Couple of them.
How about this? 3 seed Tennessee against 14 seed Louisiana. The Chris Malvo Bowl. Huh? Chris Malvo, former assistant at Louisiana, now hitting Tennessee. Justin's laughing, so that's good. I got him to crack a little bit.
It's also in the wee hours of the morning, so I may be more than cracking in more than.
All right, I'll speed this up. I forgot. I'm on Central Time Zone for a change. He's on Eastern Time Zone. This is a flip of roles. Now you know what I felt like last year. And except we're recording this, we didn't record last year. Florida versus Alabama. I know that's an SEC Super Regional, but I think we're not going to be able to avoid that, Justin.
You can't.
We're gonna get a couple of Super Regionals. I've got LSU as a 5, hosting Arkansas as a 12. Mm-hmm. Again, I don't love it, but the committee doesn't really look into that. They don't try to break that up. And again, I think it's unavoidable this year with all the SEC sites that are hosting, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Half. Hey. So you're gonna get some. Oklahoma State, Georgia. Sign me up for that. 6-11. Yep. I'm down for that. UCLA, Missouri, 7-10. We saw that in Mary Nutter earlier this year. I think. Maybe not. I don't know. My memory's short. And then Stanford, Duke, a rematch from last year. I like your theory. Just send Duke to Palo Alto, and we could
change things up. See what happens.
So that is our those are our 16 seeds, and then the super regional teams. All right, let's go through the rest of the field, and we're gonna kind of go speed dial here a little bit. We're not gonna go too much. We're gonna first kind of go conference by conference, the multi-bid leagues, and tell you who's pretty much a lock. And then we'll tell you who we will put on the bubble. Let's start ACC. You got Duke, Florida State, Clemson, Virginia Tech, Virginia. Do you believe those are 5 locks?
Yeah, that seems fair.
Okay.
Seems fair.
SEC, 12 locks. The one that is not a lock is Ole Miss. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay. Big 12. How many locks we got? Do we go 4?
Honestly,
We go
locks?
5? Yeah.
4. I think it's 4
Okay.
locks.
I agree. That's obviously Oklahoma, Texas, Oklahoma State, Baylor. Those are your 4 locks.
Baylor. Yep.
We got other Big 12 teams on the bubble. Okay. Oh God, Big 10. No, let's go Pac-12 first. Pac-12, 6 locks, 1 bubble team in Utah. Or no, bubble team in theory. Or do you think there's 7 locks after
I think there's
Utah?
probably 7 locks. I
With
think
Utah
Utah's
making the
probably still
Pac-12
one
title
lock.
bid. So
Mhm.
7. The 2 teams that do not make it is Arizona State and Oregon State. Okay, just for those that are wondering.
Yeah.
Again, we're speeding this up because it's late, and my God, I got to be at the airport in 2.5 hours. Okay, uh, this might be a first. Why did we agree to do this? Sunbelt 3 locks.
Yep.
No discussions needed there, which is obviously Louisiana, Texas State, South
South
Alabama.
Alabama.
Are those are the main, and then Big Ten,
2.
Northwestern, and Penn State.
Well, Northwestern and Michigan.
My bad. I can't count. Northwestern and Michigan, 2 locks. Good call, Justin. Very good. Thank you. I forgot the Big Ten existed. Which, in fairness, many do. Is that it as far as the guaranteed multi bids? There could be another
Yeah.
conference, but
Yeah.
okay. All right. So with that in mind, here are the bubble teams. Ole Miss from the SEC, UCF, Texas Tech, Big 12.
Mm-hmm.
Penn State, Indiana, Nebraska, Big 10. Those are the 3 that we think have a shot. With all due respect to
Yep.
everybody else, sorry.
Yep.
We're speeding now. It's like to say in TV shows, we now move into further in the game for further action here. Skip ahead. FAU, American bubble team.
Yep.
Won the regular season title, 41 wins. BYU, by the way, BYU bubble team, Big 12. So that's 3 bubble team. Kansas, we could throw them in there. And just a quick mention as a bubble team, but that's going to be real quick. I have a feeling.
Yeah.
Who else we got here? Is that all the bubble teams of note?
I think that's pretty much everybody that's got a shot. Yeah.
Okay. So let's kind of go through each real quick here. Of those teams, let's go with who do we believe of the Big 12 teams? UCF, Texas Tech, and BYU. Give me the pecking order there. I think it's UCF 5 ahead of Texas Tech. Beat Texas Tech head-to-head. More top 50 wins than Texas Tech. Slightly better schedule strengths than Texas Tech. I like UCF ahead of Texas Tech. They finished higher in the standings. Much more competitive in games against the Oklahomas, the Texas, and the Oklahoma States. UCF, I believe, had 11 losses by 1 run this year, which is nuts. 16 losses by 2 runs or less out of 23 losses. Texas Tech, I have as the 2nd team, and I have BYU as the 3rd team pecking order of the Big 12 there. Do you agree with that?
I think it's pretty fair, actually. I think UCF 5, Texas Tech probably 6. Yeah, no, I think that's pretty fair, actually.
All right. Big 10, I have Penn State, followed by Indiana, followed by Nebraska. Everybody else, I'm sorry, you're not going to get in. That's to me the pecking order of the Big 10. Who else here? Pac-12 we already figured out. So,
I mean, then you get into, the Ole Miss case in the SEC is interesting.
yes.
I think Ole Miss is probably in at this point.
45 RPI, I believe.
Which is why they're still in the bubble.
Yep.
Because I think otherwise those wins at the end of the season.
No marquee non-conference wins.
And some bad losses.
Correct.
Again, that's why we're still in the bubble here. That's why we still have Ole Miss in these discussions. Because otherwise, I think the wins over Arkansas and Kentucky and whatever else to end the season, I think those make a bigger difference. If you don't still have that RPI, if you don't still have those bad losses, if you don't have an absence of big wins.
87 non-conference schedule strength, not good. Their best non-conference win is Miami. And after that is Nevada.
Yeah.
That's bad. 2 quad 3 losses, 2 quad 4 losses. Lost to UAB, lost to UT Martin. Interesting. But 7 quad 1 wins, including 2 wins over LSU. You would think that's enough to get him in, but we'll do a pro con for each team real quick here, and then we'll make our picks. As far as my picks here, I'll unveil it. That's the pro. The pros is the quad 1 wins, 9 top 50 wins. The con is the non-conference schedule strength. Again, Miami of Ohio is their best non-conference win, who is in the NCAA tournament. The second best non-conference win is Nevada. Maybe you could argue it's Southeast Louisiana, who actually won the Southland. Not impressive non-conference from Ole Miss. Like, if you wanted to leave Ole Miss out, I actually think you have a case to leave them out by the
Yes.
bad non-conference.
Yes.
And you're right. What's going to save, what probably will end up saving them is winning the series at Arkansas late in the year, winning the series against Auburn late in the year, and then taking that opening game in the SEC tournament against Kentucky.
And the fact that they're in the SEC.
Oh, by the way, God forbid we leave somebody else out of the SEC. Woo.
The horror.
The sport would never would stop. Like, actually, they would cancel the sport if you left the team out of the SEC. Or maybe not. Maybe the sun will actually come out and the sport moves on like it did the last couple of years.
Just cue Annie. The sun will come out tomorrow.
There you go. Utah. Let's kind of, we've said they were a lock. So, again, their non-conference schedule is not great, but I don't see, they did what they needed to do in the Pac-12 tournament. I think let's kind of put a bow tie on that a little bit. Let's go back to the Big 12, because I think this is the easiest way to do it. Pro con. UCF, obviously the pros is 30th overall schedule strength, 9 top 50 wins, 20 losses out of 23 is inside the top 50, 0 quad 4 losses. The con, their negative is obviously the winless, no wins in the quad 1. Their other non-conference 74 coming in is not great, but it's not bad. It's okay. It's good. Our average RPI win is 114 is good. Average RPI loss 24 is really good. Non-conference best wins is Liberty and FAU. Not the most ideal, but at least in Liberty's case, they're an NCAA tournament conference champion. FAU, a regular season champion, may be in this field. They do have the 2 out of 3 wins at Texas Tech. They do have 2 wins against Kansas. They swept BYU. Those are all in the top 50. And again, you're not going to punish a team because they played 16 quad 1 games or however many quad 1 games they played and lost. Committees want you to keep playing those games, because if you punish them for losing all those games, then why are you scheduling those games? What's the point? So I don't think the committee's going to punish UCF for that. I don't think they should. By the way, Clemson has no wins in the quad 1 either, and they're a lock to be in the tournament. It's not the greatest of resumes, but I think it's a good enough resume. You finish 5th in the second best conference in the most of the year in the conference RPI rankings. I think UCF is in, although it would not shock me if UCF is the last 4 in when it gets announced. It would not shock me. RPI 42, usually that's last 4 in. But I think they're
not the 5th best conference RPI for what that's worth, which probably puts them in that last 4 in territory.
Correct. Finished 5th in the second or third best conference in the sport. Texas Tech, Red Raiders, second year for the Red Raiders of Craig Snyder. Their resume, what jumps out to them, 8 top 50 wins. They played 23. They went 8-19, I suppose, if I can count. 1 quad 4 loss, which is concerning, to UTEP. Why is everybody losing to UTEP, by the way? I feel like we've brought up UTEP way too many times on this show. Quad 3, to me, loss was to Houston. That was kind of quirky. Now, a lot of people are going to bring up the fact they got run-ruled by Texas all last 4 games they played. That's kind of overblown from what I'm told. The committee doesn't, make big conclusions out of that. And again, a lot of teams would get embarrassed with Texas right now, the way they've been swinging the bat mostly there.
Yeah.
25th overall schedule strength, 76 non-conference. Their marquee wins. They actually have 3 quad 1 wins. against Texas State, Baylor, and Charlotte in a neutral in Tallahassee opening weekend. They have a win against UCF. They have a series win against BYU. Remember, that's important to me. That's why I have them ahead of BYU. And they have a series win against Kansas, who's in the top 50 overall. I think that's good enough for them to get in as well for Texas Tech. I think I'll say this, though. That comeback that I saw on Wednesday night in the playing game against Iowa State, where they were down 6-0 in the fourth and were getting no hit, came back, Kaylee Wyckoff, walk-off homer, they win it in extra innings. If they lose that game, I think they're out. I think they're out because they probably drop even more in the RPI. That win probably saved them and got them into the tournament. Do you agree with that?
I don't know if that win saved them and got them in the tournament.
Well, not get them in, but saved them like from losing the tournament.
Yeah, it kept them alive.
Yeah, there you go.
Kept them alive.
Yeah, fair.
If they lost it, they're probably out, to your point.
Correct. Correct. That's the story there. And let's go to BYU, who is the third Big 12. No, let's go to Penn State. Let's get the Big 10 out of the way here. Penn State, in their deal, 38 RPI, limped down the stretch here. Lost to Maryland in the Big 10 tournament. Lost two out of three to Rutgers, who's a quad 3. 3 quad 4 losses for Penn State this year. Losing to Wisconsin, losing twice to Maryland. So quad 3 losses to it, which highlighted by, again, losing to a team like, Rutgers is not good. Positives, though, for Penn State. They have a win against Arkansas back in Boca Raton, Florida in February. That's carrying some weight there. They have a win at Florida Atlantic, which is a solid top 50 win. Swept Indiana, took 2 out of 3 from Nebraska. Interestingly, has 2 wins against St. Francis, Pennsylvania, Justin, who has won the conference tournament. They're in the field of the NCAA tournament, so that actually helps Penn State in.
Good RPI, too.
Helps the RPI. Clarissa Crowell did a good job scheduling. 45th overall, 19th non-conference schedule. I think Penn State's in.
No, I think so too. I mean, with the spots we have available and who's on the bubble, I think they should be. That's the third Big 10 team. And I
that's
think
your third Big 10 team.
There. I think they're in the proper stature there.
Correct. So there's your Big 10. All right. So to me, that's kind of where we're at. And here's now the teams. We discussed Ole Miss. Let's get to a couple of these other teams. BYU. Let's go to BYU for a moment. Then we'll get to 2 more teams, and then we're going to make some decisions here. BYU, 47 RPI. 3 quad 1 wins. 2 wins against Oklahoma State, including this week at the Big 12 tournament. They have a win against Oklahoma. They have 8 top 50 wins. They also have a win against Texas Tech. They have a win against Ole Miss, who's a bubble team. That took place in Honolulu opening weekend. They have 3 wins over Kansas in Kansas. Negatives, this sounds strange to say, but a quad 3 loss at Arizona State is a bad loss this year, Justin. That's a weird stat. Lost at Houston. They did lost to home. Lost to Houston at home, but did win the series. But yes, lost to Houston, bad loss there. 3 quad 4 losses. Long Beach State, Sacramento State. Another shout out, Sacramento State.
That's some good wins.
How the heck they're not in the tournament? What happened to them?
What conference tournaments do to you?
I guess, Joe. And Utah Valley. They lost to Utah Valley on the road there.
There's a couple of rough losses in there.
Schedule strength, 41 overall. That's good. Non-conference schedule strength, 173. No bueno. No bueno. You're on the bubble.
Yeah, firmly. And maybe on the wrong side of it.
Indiana. Got to the Big Ten tournament final. They have 7 top 50 wins, 7-14. Mm-hmm. 2 wins against Northwestern, a win against Oregon. Florida Atlantic win in Boca, a win against Nebraska in the Big Ten semifinal. Wins against Kansas and Louisville for the Indiana Hoosiers. They have 3 quad 4 losses, highlighted by Gardner Webb. They also have 2 losses to Wisconsin. They lost a series to Wisconsin. That is unbelievable,
Yeah.
folks. They have a quad 3 loss as well to Purdue. Overall schedule strength, 81, non-conference 127. That's Indiana. Nebraska. We'll go through Nebraska and then we'll go to FAU and then we're going to, because to me, these are the teams who are fighting for the last couple of spots here. And really one spot, you could argue. Nebraska, 36 schedule strength, 22 non-conference. Really, really good. 4 top 50 wins. Not good. 4-15, in fact, against top 50 wins. Not good. They do have wins against Oregon, South Alabama, which is good. They have a Penn State win. They have a win against Kansas. 6 quad 3 losses, though. 2 quad 4 losses, which were to New Mexico State, powerhouse from Las Cruces, and then Northern Colorado, who actually is in the NCAA tournament. So that's
The tournament team.
So that is Nebraska's resume. And then the final team we'll talk about, because honestly, we'll briefly mention Kansas, but we're not going to go too much detail there. FAU, the regular season American Conference champs, got blown out in the semis against Wichita in Wichita. Wichita things happened. That's what happened. So they lost in the semis. 41 RPI, 4 top 50 wins, 2 wins against Charlotte, quad 1 wins. Charlotte, the American Conference tournament champs. They won that at Charlotte. 1 against Michigan, Big Ten tournament champions. Beat Louisville, top 50 win. No quad 4 losses. Those are all positives, goods. Here's some negatives. 99 schedule strength, 121 non-conference schedule strength. 7 quad 3 losses. 2 to Wichita State, happens. That's not a big deal. Lost to South Florida, who kind of faded down to the 60s. Ooh, but still in Tampa. Lost to Boston College at home. Lost 2 out of 3 to North Texas. Lost to East Carolina. Those losses there. 141 games there. We'll mention Kansas real brief. If Kansas doesn't collapse the last 11 out of 12, I think Kansas would have been in this field. But they collapsed. And I lost to Kansas City in there. Swept at home by BYU. The only win they've had in the last 11, 12 games was Houston. They barely held on for that in the Big 12 tournament. Do you agree with that? We can eliminate Kansas?
Yeah, unfortunately. I hate it for the Jayhawks, but they kind of did it themselves.
Agreed. Love that team. Great story, but you got to finish better than what you did.
Yeah.
So, as you've noticed, we've kind of narrowed this down. Would you agree, because we're going to eliminate one team right here, Indiana is ahead of Nebraska. The semifinal win, I think, knocks Nebraska out. The Big Ten is not going to get 5 teams. No way. If they do, my goodness, just give up this. Yeah. So Nebraska, sorry, you're out. You had your chance. Maybe if you win the semi, I think that was an elimination game. So we have one spot left. Okay, because maybe 2 spots, actually. 2 spots. Ole Miss, BYU, FAU, Indiana, 2 spots. Last 2 spots in the field. With Texas Tech hovering there, Penn State and UCF. Okay, I think that's your probably last 5, 6 teams in the, that's where we're at here. Texas Tech, UCF, Penn State, with BYU, FAU, Indiana. That's 6 teams. 4 of those get in. And I think and Ole Miss, excuse me. So 6, 7 teams. Math will figure it out itself. That's kind of where we're at here. That 56 to 64, 57 range there. I think we agree, Justin. UCF, Penn State, Texas Tech in over Ole Miss, FAU, BYU. Agreed? And Indiana. Agree with all that?
Yeah.
For time purposes?
Those 3, yeah, for argument's sake here, yeah.
UCF, by the way, FAU, because I know some people brought up on my social media about FAU and UCF. UCF, most of the metrics favor them. They beat them head-to-head recently in April. I think UCF will get the pecking order over FAU, whatever that means, whether it be UCF gets the slot, who knows. But I think UCF gets it over FAU. I think Penn State's in that schedule strength, Texas Tech. So that leaves us with 3 teams with 1 spot left. FAU, Indiana, BYU. We've read off the metric, all the math there, Justin. Your quick thoughts on that. 3 teams.
Well, and that's putting Ole Miss in too.
I'm sorry, 4 men. I can't count. Thank
Well,
you for. I can't.
but I think
Two spots. Two
I
spots.
don't
4 teams. You're right. There you go. Ole Miss
I
is
don't
one.
really have a question that Ole Miss is getting in based on being in the SEC. So I think it's fair actually.
I agree. I agree. I,
Um on that last one, yeah, those three probably, and if those three go head to head, um, to me, I think it's Florida Atlantic, personally, FAU. The metrics favor them. That the non-conference strength of schedule is weak for all three. Amongst the three, FAU's is strongest. FAU has the cleanest sheet of the three. And I think the American being a two bid league versus the Big Ten being a four bid league and the Big 12 being what would be a seven bid league, I think American being a two bid league is the most likely occurrence of those three, too, which I think also buoys FAU. Not that it's a determining factor, but it's certainly something in their favor.
I think those are good cases. If it was up to me, I would go FAU. I think the Americans should be a two bid league, but I'm not. But that's me. My concern that Indiana, with this Big Ten tournament run, some pretty good non-conference wins early in the year. Granted, it was early, and then there was a middle of March game in Boca, Indiana at FAU. Indiana won. If the committee decides that these two teams are pretty similar, their schedule strengths are actually pretty similar, I just wonder if they go ahead to use the head-to-head card and go with Indiana over FAU. My other concern, and they'll deny this, Justin, but history. Indiana made the tournament last year. FAU hasn't in 8 years. I just wonder if Indiana, the last image they have of FAU is getting ruled by Wichita, whereas the last image with Indiana is making this Big Ten tournament run and beating Northwestern, beating the Big Ten regular season champions twice over the last week. I wonder if that puts them over FAU. I don't like it, Justin, but my gut and head's telling me I think that's what the committee's going to do.
I mean, if the committee gives the Big Ten four bids, it's a mistake, but we've seen them make mistakes like that before.
Agreed. I'm not disagreeing. I don't disagree. I just wonder. I just wonder what if they will do that. And so I will. My heart says FAU. I would love to be wrong. I hope tomorrow night they're in, and you're making fun of me. In fact, I will make this proclamation for you, sir.
God.
If FAU gets in, I will buy you a Dr. Pepper.
Okay, I'll accept
Deal?
that.
Huh?
Yeah,
I don't want anything in return because I look, and for the record, I agree. I would put FAU in over Indiana.
The American should be a two-bid league.
Agreed. Okay, let's just say that publicly because people are going to be ripping me while I'm on the flight. And why did you did this? I agree. The committee's got to prove it to me though that they're gonna they would
Sure.
do that.
That's
And
fair.
I don't know, man. I don't know. This is tough. I feel brutal about it. I think they go Indiana. I think their Indiana slips in there. I think it's a 50-50 toss-up, and that's my concern. If it's a toss-up, what is going to be the difference maker? What are they going to value? Now, we're going to find out if they use the KPI or not, because if they go by KPI, FAU's ahead of Indiana. FAU's KPI is in the mid-30s, so that's very good. Do they value the fact that, and do they give him a mulligan? Hey, look, you lost to Wichita. Look, it's on the road. It's a road game, which is, by the way, that's why I hate mid-majors that do conference tournaments in random sites. I always feel like for mid-majors, it should be at the home of the regular season champion. Like this tournament, think about it. I really think, if this tournament should have been in Boca Raton.
I actually like neutral sites. I like.
Well,
neutral
that's
sites.
different. But, well, I don't, can the American Ford, like, where would you put it on neutral site? I
Well,
mean, the ASUN did that with Alabama.
but I don't mind it being on campus sites. I think it being pre-planned is actually preferable to have the best tournament you can, because then everybody knows.
But my FAU earned the right to host that tournament. Why should
Well,
Wichita State have an advantage of hosting the tournament when they finished in the middle of the pack?
but the same when it's planned in advance. I don't think standing matters. I don't think standing matters when it's planned in advance and it's set up. And hey, you're going to host next year, and you're going to host the year after, whatever that. I don't have a problem because once it's planned, everybody's on equal footing.
All right, we'll get it. Wow, this is an impromptu argument on conference tournaments. Well, we'll table that for a year from now when we get to championship week. Because we forgot to mention BYU. So we both, it's interesting though, we both do not like BYU. No, that's not true. I like BYU. That non-conference schedule is going to keep them out, correct? Is that really what we both
Yeah,
agree, right?
not non-conference schedule's a problem, and when you're that low in the pecking order in your conference, like seventh in the Big 12 is an issue.
Well, they finished sixth in fairness
Well, seventh team, the seventh
pecking
team.
order, correct. The non-conference schedule is worse than Indiana. It's worse than FAU by far. I know that they got the marquee wins. Look, the committee may go with them. If they go with BYU, it's because of the marquee wins.
Yeah.
And I could see that. But I just wonder, man, committees usually knock you for that non-conference schedule and those quad four losses. So I think it's Indiana, FAU, BYU in that order. I could be wrong. I think it's really close. I'm going to go Indiana. We'll see. Justin, you got nothing to lose and a Dr. Pepper to gain if I'm wrong. So either way, you win. You win, Justin, because if you're right, if FAU gets in, you get a Dr. Pepper. If FAU doesn't get in, you get to rip the Big Ten. It's a win-win.
Well, if the Americans
And
are
the
one
committee.
big, if the Americans are one big league, it'll be a sad day because they've earned the right to be more than that. But we'll see.
I agree. Some of the bottom teams didn't help. Middle teams didn't help actually either. Some of the teams like Tulsa, Wichita fading didn't help. For the record, again, because I know I'm going to get ripped, but I know what's going to happen. I'm going to land. I'm going to be at the gate, getting out by the board on the plane. I'm going to look at my phone. It's blowing up, and people are mad. If I'm wrong, I'm perfectly fine with FAU getting in, but I have to kind of feel like, based on history, I think the committee tends to go Indiana. I would be fine with FAU in as your second American team, but let's see if it happens. Let's see if it happens.
Yeah.
All right. So that is the Nerdcast. Go to D1Softball.com and see the bracket. See the bracket. Break it down. See what you like. See what you don't. You're going to see the full field of 64 on D1Softball.com. By the time you're watching this, it's there. We're not going to go through the brackets here because we want you to click and read the brackets. See, we get it. We're smart like that.
See how well the projections turn out.
However, Justin, because you do a thing or two about the mid majors, let's go through the one bid automatic bids, read them off, and let's get some quick thoughts on some of the notables of the one bid leagues. For example, Liberty won the A-Sun.
Yep.
Significant because
Conference USA.
It's going to happen sooner or later. Boy, this is a foreshadowing of next year when we screw a lot. By the way, please, can we not announce realignment news during the conference tournaments? Like, we're blowing up with breaking news on Friday. I'm like, I don't have time for this. USA, they came out of the losers bracket, Justin.
Yep.
Significant. Won in extra innings against Western Kentucky. You and I were kind of nervous because if they lost, they would have been an at-large on this, and we would have had to debate whether they get in or not. They have some bad quad four losses, but they have some pretty good wins. That would have been an interesting debate. Thankfully, we don't have to do it. Which one bid conference champion stands out to you as a team you want to give some shout-outs to?
Well, I mean, you got Southeastern Louisiana finally breaks through in the Southland. Florida Gulf Coast in the A-Sun. It's a good club there. UNC Wilmington beat Campbell and Delaware en route to the CAA championship. Northern Colorado back-to-back in the Big Sky. SEMO beat Eastern Illinois to win the Ohio Valley. Eastern Illinois was a good club with some really good pitching. I mean, there's a handful of them. Grand Canyon in the WAC. I think it's a dangerous club. I think Grand Canyon's a dangerous club. And wins the WAC again. So I think there's a handful of them. These automatic bids, these conference champions that could have a shot at making some noise at least.
Interesting to see how that all plays out championship week. And then obviously the full deal will be announced Sunday night. So we'll be on at 6:30 Eastern. It'll be me and Jenna Becerra, assuming Jenna will still want to talk to me. She may not want to talk to me, Justin, after we basically, I don't know, put UCLA ahead of Stanford and dog Stanford. It was a nitpick more than anything, but I get it. We'll be on. What are you the most interested in on Selection Show? What is the most interesting thing you're interested to find out?
Top 8 seeds, probably the top 8 seeds. Um, I think there's enough ambiguity and potential there that I think that might be the most interesting thing by the end of it.
I agree. I think the seeding will be fascinating. I am interested who gets 64. I really do think it's a toss up. FAU, Indiana, BYU. What does the committee make? What do they use as the ultimate decider? Is it the BYU marquee wins? Do they? By the way, is it really crazy if they left Ole Miss out and put one of the other teams in? Could we see FAU and Indiana get in and they make and take Ole Miss out because of their lack of non-conference schedule wins? There is that. I don't think that's super crazy. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I have Ole Miss in, but
It's not super crazy. I think they're in, but it's not super crazy.
All right. So we agree on this. Indiana, or if you obviously Justin likes FAU or BYU, one of those teams will be 64. The team that does not get in will be 65 and 66. We'll have that on our bracket sheet that's on D1Softball.com. We have Ole Miss 63 with the 45 RPI, Texas Tech, and then either probably UCF or Penn State 61-60. That could go either way. Depends on what they value more. In fact, I could see Penn State 61, UCF 60, but again, it could be either way. That's, to me, I think the last four in. And then again, the first four out is probably the two teams we mentioned. In my case, FAU with BYU out. You have Indiana out. Nebraska, first four out. Kansas, first four out. The collapse there cost them big time. To me, those are your first four out. Any disagreements there?
No, it seems pretty reasonable, actually.
Let's give them a tease. Not announce which bracket that I have assembled on the sheet intrigues you, catches your eye before we sign off.
That's interesting. Kind of like the one you gave Oklahoma, to be honest. Not necessarily for upset potential, but I kind of like the makeup of it.
Oregon, Missy Lombardi returning to Oklahoma as the two. Oregon's the two, and then I had, I believe Penn State was the three there.
Penn State, yeah.
Yeah, there's a little storyline there. I have Florida hosting Washington with UCF, and obvious storylines of galore there with Heather Tarr and Cindy Ball Malone, of course, reunited. Heather Tarr coached Cindy Ball Malone at Pacific when Heather Tarr was an assistant and Coach Ball Malone was a player. Ball Malone was an assistant for Heather Tarr at Washington for a couple of years, has been an assistant for Heather Tarr in the U.S. national team. Jen Salling is on Coach Ball Malone's staff. Obviously played for Heather Tarr at Washington. Victoria Haywood played with Jen Salling in the Canadian national team. Sarah Willis played at Washington as well. So there's a lot of storylines there. Tim Walton has been an assistant under Tarr and Ball Malone as well. That's a storyline there. That could be interesting if that's regional. Arizona LSU I have paired up. There's a lot of history there too in postseason between those two programs.
Yeah.
And we'll see what happens. Courtney Deifel, perhaps against her alma mater, Cal.
What's not to love?
National champion at Cal.
I heard that somewhere, actually.
Yeah, a little bit. So again, check it out, D1Softball.com. I give your feedbacks out there. Be nice. I understand we could agree to disagree. Let's see what the committee does. 6:30 Eastern, the selection live reaction show. Justin, tell the audience more about our coverage here leading up to selection show, because you obviously will be talking to the committee chairman after the fact and kind of our coverage leading up to it.
Yeah, we got the live show during the selection show after the selection show. I'll host a talent on Sunday night. Yeah, I'll be talking to the committee chairperson after the selection show. We've got all kinds of regional previews that'll be out. Graham Hayes will have questions that can be answered in the tournaments. I'll have all kinds of stuff in there. Wall to wall, same as usual. Nationwide coverage, and we mean that.
That's correct. We will have the live reaction show 6:30. We'll go through. We have a couple of guests, hopefully, in mind. We won't give it away just yet. We'll check out social media for that. And then me and Vic will record an In the Circle special. We'll record our Monday podcast reacting to the selection show and their picks and so much more. So keep it on D1Softball.com. Keep it on In the Circle as well. This will be on the D1 Softball channel. Thank you for watching and bearing with us. Justin, are we still friends?
Sure.
Oh,
Even at 3 a.m.
That didn't sound really great. I think you're mad at me. I didn't have FAU in. I got to get a lot of Boca people are going to be mad at me. I love that Paradise. I'm just thinking what the committee's going to do. If it was me, I would go FAU as well. But my job is to see what the committee's going to do.
I wanted the Dr. Pepper with no strings attached, but you attach strings. So,
all right, how about this? Okay. No. All right, how about this? How about this? FAU's in, you get one Dr. Pepper. If it's not FAU, if it's Indiana, you get two Dr. Peppers.
I'll just take a Dr. Pepper for nothing.
I'm not going to give you one for nothing. I'm just going to, let's make this interesting. Somehow I don't get anything out of this except, how about this? If Indiana, or if I'm right about Indiana, you have to say, all right, you were right. That's all. That's all I want. I don't want sodas. I just want, oh, you're right.
I guess I can do that.
And apology. All right. Justin's got to take a nap. He's got a flight to catch as we're finished recording this. I am getting ready to head to the airport, believe it or not.
Yeah.
I have to finish to get going to an Oklahoma City airport to catch a connecting flight to St. Louis, a 6:20 a.m. Central flight to go to St. Louis, and then hopefully get to Orlando at a reasonable hour and join everybody at the live selection show. Hopefully I'm not stranded somewhere by the time you're watching this. So until then, we'll talk to you on Sunday night. This has been a special edition on the D1 Softball Nerdcast. Thank you, Kendall Rogers, Mark Etheridge, Aaron Fitt. I don't know. You guys do a better job than we did. We don't have the graphic sheets and all that. You guys make it more interesting. Watch it there. For Justin McLeod, back out in Atlanta, I'm Eric Lopez here at Oklahoma City. We hope you've enjoyed this unique edition of Nerdcast, breaking down the NCAA tournament field.